Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video for today, Friday, June 28th. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how today's stream is going to be structured. We'll be going through the RotoWire lineups, taking a look at all the lineups for tonight's games, anything that is notable from those lineups just in general, as well as the weather report for today. Will not be having a recap since unfortunately did not have a stream yesterday. If anybody does have any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop them in the live chat and I'll answer them as quickly as possible. Then after that, we'll get moved over to my core picks, which today is just going to be kind of players to talk about that have some pretty good history in the past. Been doing all right as of late. If you want to play them, you can. If you don't, obviously, probably going to go after some different stacks tonight overall. And then after that, we're going to get moved over to my cheat sheet on the sports affiliation website, which is 100% free. So definitely be sure to use that as a resource as you're building out your lineups tonight. But we're going to be talking through the top GPT teams that I do have to stack from that sheet as well. But without further ado, we'll get started with the RotoWire lineup. So we're going to be taking a look at any game that does have a double-digit chance of rain or higher for the weather report for today. So there's going to be 3 in total. So let me scroll down to them as we get moving here. So the first one up is going to be the Chicago White Sox, 42% chance of rain tonight versus the Colorado Rockies. You know, if that game is able to be played, they will be played because the White Sox do have a good ground crew. That's kind of one shining thing for them after this terrible season for them. Two of the worst teams going off against each other in tonight's game. Could be interesting, could be not. Who knows at this point in time. And then for Atlanta, down in Atlanta, Pittsburgh, down in Atlanta, we have the Braves and the Pirates, 34% chance for in there. Would expect that the game ultimately does end up going off. And then last but not least, just checking my notes here, down in Kansas City, we have the Royals and the Guardians, 33% chance of rain there. So those are the 3 that do have double-digit chance of rain. If anything like majorly changes with them, as we get closer to lock, we'll try to leave some type of update down in the comments. And I just want to start off by saying, too, I do apologize for Wednesday. I had Ryan Jeffers in the core picks. He didn't ultimately end up starting. That news came out later, which I was tied up with some other obligations, so I was not able to post that. But kind of with what we got going on here, we're going to take a look at some of these lineups. So these are kind of all my notable notes that I wrote down for the lineups that did get announced tonight. So I'm going to scroll up to the very top. We're going to start off with the Texas Rangers. So Travis Jankowski's in right field and batting 7th for them. Andrew Neisner is going to be catching for them tonight, hitting 8th. So some guys that are a little bit cheaper there if you really want to go that direction. And then on the Baltimore side, we got James McCann hitting 9th at catcher, and there is no Adley Rutschman in tonight's game. And then we move down to the New York Yankees. We got Jahmai Jones as the DH hitting 9th tonight for the Yankees. So that is a note at the very least. And then let me see. The next one I got is the San Diego Padres. Bryce Johnson in right field hitting 9th. He's played a couple different games from them since getting called up on Monday. Not anybody that really want to play, but just want to make a note of it. And then Sam Hilliard for the Colorado Rockies. He's had some upside at times. He's playing center field for them tonight. He's hitting 9th against Drew Thorpe, who's never pitched against the Rockies before, so there is no career history there at that. But could be a sneaky play. And then we move over to Atlanta. So we're moving over a couple games now. Luke Williams is starting in left field, batting 9th. He did recently rejoin the team. I don't think he's on FanDuel. He could be, but I could be wrong at the same time. So we'll see whether or not that makes an impact. Probably not anybody I really want to get to. I mean, if you wanted to make, I almost made a note of this one too for Houston with Joey Luperfido, the left-handed outfielder for them. Can play first base as well, but he has typically not hit versus left-handed pitching so far this year, but this is his 5th consecutive start going against Jose Quintana. So that is something of note, but I'm not sure I'm getting to him tonight. And then we'll keep moving down. So for Cleveland, we do see Austin Hedges catching and hitting 9th tonight. So no Bo Naylor there. And then trying to see where I'm at. So moving over to the Reds, we got Noelvi Marte made his return from the suspended list yesterday. He went 3 for 3, I think it was, and then scored 3 runs as well. So I see a comment in here. So this says, Danny, how do you raise the rostership on RotoWire? That's a good question. So raising the rostership, obviously every simulator is a little bit different. I don't use like their builder myself. If that's kind of what you're asking, or if you're just seeing like what they already have listed as rostership rate. So that's kind of two different questions there. Be sure to let me know, Danny. I'll try to answer it as best as possible. Although typically I don't use RotoWire. Most of my MLB stuff I do hand build. So just kind of going through there. I did use a little bit of a product that my buddy had last year, but his site is not up anymore. So that is kind of how I just approach MLB in general. And then the opposite end of that game, we got Brandon Crawford playing shortstop, hitting 8th. Matt Carpenter at DH, hitting 7th, who does have a home run versus Frankie Montas in his career. So it could be a sneaky play there if you want to go out and play him. And then last but not least, I have the Twins, Christian Vasquez, starting at catcher, hitting 9th for them. So that's kind of what I do have in terms of notable lineup things, guys that are typically, not in the lineup every day type of stuff. Maybe some potential value there. Most of these guys probably going to be irrelevant on tonight's slate overall, though. But just want to mention those as we get going because, with the live stream, I do have that ability to look at some of these lineups, see if there's anything notable. Somebody that's not playing, somebody that's playing that we didn't expect. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about my core picks over there. So let me get off of here. We'll get over to FanDuel. I see Danny put another comment in there, so we'll get to you as soon as I get FanDuel brought up over here. For the people that don't know, core picks, typically a combination of past performance versus the respective opponent, as well as some recent history and one pitcher for hitters. Like I said, tonight, I'm just mentioning guys that do have some pretty decent history in the past. Whether or not you want to play them is ultimately up to you. And I'm not sure I'm going to play all 5 of these guys in the same lineup myself, but there is definitely some possibilities there. And let's see what Danny had to say here. So what do I use when I hand build? And when you hand build, what are you looking at to make your laps? So for me, it's a lot based on past history and kind of that combination of past history and recent performances. Obviously trying to sprinkle in some stacks here and there when I can, and then kind of ultimately mixing and matching at that pitcher position, if that makes sense. So for me, every day, or I should say every evening, I go through, I look at the next game or the next day's worth of games, Monday through Friday, and then I give each pitcher a grade, whether I would consider them in play, kind of a risky play, whether, maybe they got some hit or miss history versus the team they're going against, just in general. Maybe they're coming off the IL or they came off the IL recently. We're on a pitch count. We don't know how far deep into the game they're going to go. Or maybe they're just a young pitcher that hasn't pitched too much at major league level. And then there's the ones that are kind of straight up avoids too. So those are the guys that have just been pitching like really, really badly. And then maybe have some bad history versus the team they're going against, one or the other kind of. And then I also go through the hitters and I'll make notes whether their past performance versus their respective pitcher. I'll look at that. So some of the guys that really stand out in that regard, sometimes they end up in the core picks, sometimes they end up in my cheat sheet just in general. And then from there, I take a combination of that plus guys that are playing pretty well as of late, try to mix it into some stacks, couple one-offs here and there. That's just typically how I like to do it. But, obviously every state's slate is a little bit different for me. Some slates I like to mix and match a little bit more. Some slates I like to, kind of keep my core in check, whether it's the core 4 hitters playing like 3 of them together in pretty much every lineup, playing 4 of them together in every lineup. It varies very much slate to slate in that regard, if that kind of makes a little bit of sense there. And then my MLB DFS notes with that, they're all up on Patreon as well. So if you want kind of I don't even know what the correct word for this is, but probably, just kind of the general access to that, they're up there. It saves you guys a little bit of time from doing it yourself if that's something you wanted to do. And then the cheat sheet, once again, is 100% free up on the Sports Affiliation website. But in terms of what I do have for the core picks tonight, so at pitcher, there's not like a standout pitcher in my personal opinion tonight, based on kind of the research, based on how these guys have been performing as of late. I went with the cheap option, $6,400. Andre Payente, I believe is how you pronounce it, but he's pitching for the Cardinals tonight. Goes against the Reds. He's had some pretty decent success versus them in the past, although it's really limited sample size. And Heimer Candelario is still out for the Reds tonight, so that is another notable one as well. Obviously, like I said, they got Noelvi Marte back, but this lineup doesn't instill probably as much fear in it as we thought was going to happen at the beginning of the season. He had a 40-point performance earlier this season, pitched all in relief versus them in 2023, so there is some upside to be had there at that. If you look at him a little bit more in totality, The season long numbers probably don't look as good. I'm going to go back here because, the fantasy points per game is only like 11, but you have to keep in mind this guy was a reliever about half the year too as well. So he's got 3 wins. Erie's up over 5. So there was a couple of rough starts in there as well. So the start versus the Cubs wasn't the greatest, and the start, like this last start versus San Francisco, very hit or miss. He still got 22 fantasy points, but gave up 5 runs. And then the start versus Houston obviously was pretty bad. But going against Cincinnati, like I said, 40-point performance versus them last time. And, against Colorado, he had a 39-point performance as well. So if he goes out there, if he pitches well, it's a guy that is dirt cheap that allows you to pay up for bats elsewhere if that's something you really want to do. If you want to pay up a little bit more at that pitcher position, you can do that as well. 2 other guys that end up in my cheat sheet today: Bailey Ober, $9,800, got some decent histories versus Seattle, and Yusei Kikuchi, who's pitched really well against the Yankees last couple of years. So there is some upside there, and the Yankees lineup has kind of been struggling as of late. Let me see here. Danny put another comment in here too. Said, I tried using your stacks, but it's a mess. I have about $200. What's your advice for me to build the bankroll to play contests and stuff like that? So it depends on like how much you want to play on a given day. Like for me, typically in the past, I played a lot of single entry and like 3 max and stuff like that. And I don't put a lot of money in myself. MLB, I'll say right off the bat, is the hardest the hardest sport to consistently build bankroll in, just because anything can happen on any given day. And it's a very event-based sport. So that means when a specific event happens, you get more points for that. So home runs are obviously worth more points than any other type of hit, more than the stolen base, anything else like that. Because on a home run, you're getting 18.7 points every single time. And then if there's any other runners on base, you're getting more than that. So that weighs very heavily. And then when you look at FanDuel from the pitching side, wins and quality starts. If you can get wins and quality starts, if you can get your pitcher right on most slates, you're going to at least double up most of the time, unless your hitters are just completely terrible. So that would be my advice. Finding the pitcher that really stands out the most. I would typically go away from cash game and double ups, which is something you don't say about other sports, but just for MLB, there's a lot more variance to it. So you kind of have to embrace the variance. Like you can have 2 good days and 3 bad days and still be profitable in MLB. But there's going to be stretches where it's going to be really good. And there's going to be stretches where it's not so good. Like you just have to embrace the volatility with that, if that makes sense, and just try to hope for, I won't say hope, but like try to do as much as we can with that. So Danny said thank you as well. So kind of for the core picks that I do have tonight. So like I said, this one's like not as much as I play these guys all in the lineup together, but these are guys that have decent history versus their past or versus their respective opponents. Excuse me. So Rafael Devers, $3,900 for the Boston Red Sox. He is 1 for 2 versus Randy Vasquez with a home run. I like stacking I like stacking the Red Sox against the Padres and Randy Vasquez tonight. He only has 1 career start versus them. Came with the Yankees last season. Had like 14 fantasy points. But Rafael Devers is the one guy that did hit him really well in that game. Devers, obviously, we know what he can do on any given night. 284 average, 16 home runs, 42 RBIs, averaging just under 12 fantasy points per game at $3,900. If we look at what he's done lately in his last 4 starts, I have to say last 4 starts because yesterday didn't ultimately end up starting. He has at least 1 hit in all 4 of them. 2 multi-hit games, 2 home runs, 2 double-digit performances, and at least 9 fantasy points in 3 of those games. So gives us a pretty safe floor, but does have some really strong upside versus a young, I wouldn't even say young, inexperienced, young, unproven pitcher in Randy Vasquez tonight. And then we're going to keep moving over. And the next guy that I have here is Bobby Witt Jr. Not been quite as strong as of late. It hasn't been bad, but in terms of like DFS performance, hasn't been quite as good. But in his career versus Tristan McKenzie, the expected starting pitcher for the Cleveland Guardians tonight, he is 4 for 12 with 2 home runs. He is on a modest 4-game hitting streak, although he has no multi-hit games and no home runs during that time span, and only 1 double-digit performance, 2 performances of 9 fantasy points or higher. So the floor is really low, but he should get a hit at the very least. Got that good history versus Tristan McKenzie in the past, $4,200. It sounds kind of underwhelming when we talk about it that way, but the high-end upside is definitely there once again tonight. 310 batting average, 12 home runs, 53 RBIs, averaging about 13.5 fantasy points per game at $4,200. Definitely a guy that could have some pretty strong upside on any given slate and has that decent history versus Tristan McKenzie in the past. And then next, I didn't think I'd ever play Stephen Kwan at this price tag, I'll be honest. But the Guardians do look like a pretty good team to stack tonight overall. Alec Marsh, 2 career starts versus them so far in his young career, and they haven't been good. Stephen Kwan is 3 for 4 versus him in his career. He has at least one hit in 5 out of his last 6 games. 2 of those games have been multi-hit games. 2 home runs, too. Stephen Kwan's hitting for a little bit of power this year, which something I don't think a lot of people saw it coming. And then in that time span, he's got 3 double-digit performances in those 6 games, at least 4, or he's had 4 games of at least 9 fantasy points. So the floor is relatively safe with Stephen Kwan. It could be pretty low, but the high-end upside might not be quite as much as some of these other pay-up options, but does look pretty good overall. He's up to or I should say he's probably down to a 373 average because he was at 390 at one point in time. 7 home runs, 24 RBIs, averaging just under 13 fantasy points per game at $3,900. Obviously, you like the fantasy points per game to be a little bit higher. Obviously, he was banged up a little bit this season, but a guy that does get on base quite a bit at a really good clip. So he's going to have a relatively safe floor at the end of the day. Does have the 2 home runs in the last 6 games, so maybe he can add another one tonight, but he's got that good history versus Alec Marsh. So I definitely do like the upside of Stephen Kwan tonight, even if he's $3,900. If you're paying down at that pitcher position, it's not that hard to get to him overall. And this Cleveland team is going to look pretty good to stack because they got some decent history versus Alec Marsh as well in those lone 2 starts where they did hit him really well. And then last but not least, we got Randall Grichuk here at $2,400. Just make sure he's in the starting lineup tonight. I will try to keep an eye on that as best as possible. Do have another I do have another I can't even think of more word that I want to use. I do have another commitment around 6:30 to 7:30. So if it pops up during that time, we'll have access to that. But I know this is one of the later games. Keep an eye out for it just in general. They go against the Oakland A's. JP Sears on the mound. JP Sears, like the only guy I should say the only 2 guys that have faced him before in the past, Randall Grichuk and Eugenio Suarez for this Arizona team. And Randall Grichuk's 2 for 6 with 2 home runs versus him in his career. He has at least 1 hit in 2 out of his last 3 starts, and 1 multi-hit game during that time span, 0 home runs, 1 double-digit performance. So it's harder to track like the recent success for Randall Grichuk just because he is essentially a part-time player. He really just plays against left-handed pitching, but he has hit JP Series pretty well in the past. He's only $2,400. If you look at what he's done so far in the season, 292 average, 2 home runs, 17 RBIs, did get a late start to the season as he was injured headed into the year and only averaged about 6 fantasy points per game. But keep in mind with these part-time players, that number is always going to be lower because sometimes they'll start games versus like a certain handed pitcher and then they'll come out of the game. So they won't have as many at bats, or sometimes they'll pinch hit and come in late and it will bring their fantasy points per game down, unless they're getting like a triple, a home run, getting on base, scoring a run, getting an RBI, everything else like that. So that is just something important to keep in mind as you're looking at some part-time players just in general. But definitely like his upside for $2,400. Looks like a pretty good matchup for him tonight. Obviously, once again, just need to make sure that he is in that starting lineup. But with that being said, if you would go with these 5 players that do currently have listed here, $14,200 remaining, over $3,500 per player. So you can pretty much pay for anybody that you would want in that situation. If you go with Payante as your pitcher tonight, you can definitely do that as well. Like I said, good night to mix and match at the pitcher position just because there is no true standout pitcher tonight. Once again, I got like Bailey Ober, Yusei Kikuchi, Payante as kind of the 3 in my cheat sheet. Logan Webb's another guy that has some pretty decent upside at like $9,000. Been very hit or miss versus the Dodgers in his career. Although some of the guys that have hit him really well on the Dodgers team are guys that are currently on the IL. So that is something at least of note and does have that decent upside at the same time as well. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to cheat sheet and talk about those top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. So give me 1 second as I do pull that up. And once again, the cheat sheet is 100% free. It's up on the sports affiliation website. So definitely feel free to use it as a resource as you're building out your lamps. Once again, it does come out every Monday through Friday. And these are the teams that I do have for tonight. They probably don't look like the most exciting teams on most slates, but Cleveland Guardians going against Alec Marsh. Obviously, we mentioned them with Stephen Kwan. They have hit him really well in the past, which was 2 starts last season. And, if Alec Marsh doesn't have that slider going, it's a really good opportunity for teams that are going against him. And I believe when I was doing my research and stuff, he's got an ERA over 6 like this last month. So it does look like a pretty good opportunity. Obviously, a little bit of chance of rain there. Games in Kansas City. So probably not the huge offensive outburst, but does have some pretty decent upside as well. Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, a couple other guys that have hit him pretty well in the past. And then we move over to the Red Sox going against Randy Vasquez. Looks like a really good matchup. Really limited sample size in terms of history there. But I do like getting to Rafael Devers. I like Tyler O'Neill. If you want to get to Jarren Durant tonight, you can definitely do that as well. David Hamilton's hitting second. He's been hitting pretty well as of late. Definitely a guy that has a lot of speed too. And, new stolen base rules since last year, it's really made an impact on DFS if you can capitalize on guys that get a stolen base on any given night, because that's a free 6 points at the end of the day. And then the Detroit Tigers, they're going to get Zach Plesac. So there's not a long list history versus him. It's not like the greatest history in the world either, but Plesac's been like god awful last 2 years straight now. So there is definitely some high end upside there. He did get really lit up his last start. Although, this Tigers lineup doesn't strike a lot of fear into opposing pitchers most of the time, but there could be some sneaky aspect to them as well. And then last but not least, we got the Atlanta Braves. Some of their hitters have done all right versus Martin Perez. He's coming off the IL. I can't remember if it was a back or an elbow injury that he's coming back from. I saw it yesterday, but I can't remember now off the top of my head. But they look pretty good just in general, whether you want to get to like Ozzie Albies, Marcell Ozuna. Those are the two that really hit him well in the past, but some sneaky upside with some of those other guys in that lineup as well. But with that being said, that's kind of what I do have in terms of the weather report, looking at the starting lineups, the core picks, and the top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. If anybody does have any other additional questions, feel free to drop them in live chat. Probably going to hang out here for like 2.5 more minutes, but definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me if you have not done so already. If you're brand new to the channel, if you are somebody that's been checking out the channel for a while now, and have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Obviously helps build the channel. Obviously, if you know anybody else that might be interested in some of this content, feel free to send them this way as well. Definitely would appreciate it. But in terms of the MLB DFS Core Pick live stream, Monday through Friday, 4:30 Central Time, 5:30 Eastern Time. Definitely feel free to check it out. Make sure that you do give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and this live stream in general. Obviously, going back to the live stream structure has been a little bit of a change for me once again. I've been very used to pre-recorded where, if you slip up sometimes, it's all right because you can just get rid of it. But trying to do the best as possible. Hopefully this helped you guys as you're building out your lineups for tonight. Once again, a very large slate, but a very good slate to mix and match just in general. Not sure how many lineups so I'm going to get in personally myself, but maybe 2 or 3 and then kind of go from there. It's just sometimes I have a harder time playing the slates where I don't have a good, strong feeling about the pitchers just in general. But that leads to a lot of volatility, a lot of variety in general, and sometimes you can really take advantage of that. But with that being said, once again, Core Pick live streams Monday through Friday, 4:30 Central Time, 5:30 Eastern Time. If we do have a slate that is like an early slate, won't be doing that. Sometimes if there is like enough games on a late slate, maybe I'll do a live stream for the late slate just in general. But do know I missed Tuesday and Thursday this week. Should not be the case moving forward. Thursday and Friday next week, I do have off my other full-time job, so that I just started. So those might end up being more pre-recorded videos. We'll just kind of have to see what people want to do as, kind of the week moves along. But definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tune in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.